Coming up on a Thursday edition of Live on Lakeside, we'll be talking with author Gregg Lederman about his new book, Engaged. Wait until you hear the numbers of how many people are miserable at work.
How many of you that aren't inspired?
Yes.
Quite honestly, it's going to shock you.
What's new? What's happening? What's fun? It's Holly Strano and Michael Cardamone with Live on Lakeside.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Live on Lakeside. It is Thursday, August 29th. I'm Michael Cardamone.
And I'm Holly Strano, almost to the holiday weekend.
Yes.
We're starting today with, well, something that I think is going to either shock you or maybe not so much, because you were saying before the show, I thought this number would be even lower.
Yeah.
Okay, so a recent study has revealed that only 30% of you feel inspired, engaged at your current job.
Which, again, I thought that number would be a little bit lower. Joining us this morning to help you get inspired and more engaged, whether you're the boss or an employee, author of the new book, Engaged, Gregg Lederman. Gregg, thank you so much for joining us here in Cleveland.
Hi, Gregg.
Hi, Holly and Mike. Thanks for having me.
Now, that's a huge number, Gregg, that 30%. Again, I would think that less people were satisfied or engaged at work, but it's costing the U.S. between $450 and $550 billion. Explain how that happens.
Well, if you don't have engaged employees, ones that are truly motivated and committed to act in the best interest of your company, then you suffer from lack of productivity, crappy and inconsistent customer experiences, and less profitability. It just costs more to deliver what you're doing, and you have all kinds of inherent costs in turnover of employees.
All right, you talk about something called living the brand in this book. So to our viewer that hasn't read the book yet, and I'm sure they will after this segment, what is that?
Well, because lack of engaged is so expensive, one of the solutions is to define what it means to live our brand. And there's a system behind that I write about in the book. It has three parts that the leading companies really do a great job with. First, they define who are we from a behavioral perspective. I'm not talking about just throwing your values up on the wall or doing a brand strategy so you can market better to your customer base, but truly define the non-negotiable behaviors behind your values and your brand strategy. And then secondly, you got to create reminders in the workplace. Managers need to learn the soft skills for how to talk about examples of when we're living the brand, when we're not living the brand. They need to make it part of how they hire, how they do performance reviews, how they do employee recognition. And lastly, as part of this living the brand system, after you've defined it, you remind the workforce, you have to quantify it, you have to measure. How consistently are we living it? Creating that management visibility that truly makes everyone want to care about it. And those that don't, they can go work somewhere else.
Is it realistic to think that a business out there, if it is so doom and gloom, do you think a manager or employees can turn that business from a doom and gloom environment to, boy, this is a great place to work? Is it realistic?
Well, it depends on the size of the company. If it's an enormous company, 50,000 employees, then you have to really look at what can you do in your area, in your department, in your geographic location. For smaller businesses, absolutely. But it all starts with leadership. If leadership isn't aligned and engaged themselves, it's not going to translate down to the frontline worker. But if leadership can get aligned on here is how we're going to define who we are and how we're going to measure it, then they can come together and say and learn how to do these reminders that I write about in the book. Every one of those leaders should be able to do 100, maybe 200 reminders throughout the course of the year. And if they all do it, you end up in the thousands, if not tens of thousands, of powerful reminders every year in your company.
All right. Now, Gregg, one thing that really stuck out in the book, actually throughout the whole book, this is really what I said, really? And I had to read it over twice. You say that you feel that rewards don't work the way that we often think. So explain that, because we would say, well, I would like some token of appreciation.
Right. Everyone likes a little pat on the back.
Something, right. But explain that to me, please.
There's a difference between, as Holly mentioned, the pat on the back versus a reward. So if you go back and you look, there are 7 decades of research that all says that motivation is intrinsic. You've got to create an environment where people want to be motivated and can become motivated. And what drives that environment is respect and appreciation, relationship with my boss, as well as feeling like I'm making a difference, making progress. What's never in the research, never in the top 3, and quite often not even in the top 5 is something that creates motivation, is cash or prizes or tchotchkes. But what happens is you have this entire incentive industry that's fueling this idea that if carrot and stick mentality, if you just provide rewards, you can drive performance and get this, change culture. The reality is you can't change culture with rewards. It doesn't mean you don't use them at all. It may be one small aspect of your overall strategy, but you've got to create the environment where captured successes are happening day in and day out and shared throughout the organization, fueling that recognition that really drives performance.
Makes sense.
It makes sense to me now.
Yes.
I asked you the question, you answered. Thank you so much for joining us. Please, everyone, go out and get this book, Engaged. You'll learn a lot, whether you are an employee, the employer, or even a parent at the PTA meeting. So thank you so much, Greg.
All right, you could follow him on Twitter, too. I just realized he's at Gregg Leder.
At Gregg Leder?
At Gregg Leder. All right, let's get you caught up on all the headlines.